Hello there. Hello there, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the podcast. So this is the weekly, and this is where we obviously, pick a few topics and talk about them in a bit more depth. So this week, rather than just talk about, tariffs all the time, we're going to try and talk about something else. Although, to be honest, it is kind of all still related to tariffs because that's basically what's going on at the moment. But anyway. The first thing let's kick off though with the German election. Germany had an election over the weekend, and we did get a winner. I just really wanted to ask Ralph what he thought of that, because it seems to me that the result was a bit more. It's slightly more clearer cut than the last one was, but. It'd be interesting to see what the impact is going to be, not only on Germany, which is obviously the key country in the EU, but also, what are the impacts for the EU on a broader basis. So, Ralph, what do you reckon?
I'm on. Well, first of all, as you say, we used to talk about interest rates and inflation here all the time. Now we talk about tariffs, but today we're going to pretend not to talk about this, but it is going to revert to the subject soon enough.
Yeah.
So, yes, indeed, the Germans, my old home, had an election at the weekend, and there are lots of aspects to this. Maybe before we go into an interpretation of what I think about it, maybe just to make sure that we're all on the same page, let me just say who the parties are in Germany. Because, I know this because I grew up there, but there's, really no guarantee that anybody else should know any of this. So we have these days, actually, when I grew up in Germany, we had just basically three parties in Germany. One is the so-called FDP, and that's the Lib Dem equivalent. It's basically a little bit right of center, but not very much. Then you have the CDU, that is a right of center party, and the SPD, which is a left of center party. It is also, I believe, the oldest social democratic party in Europe. So it has a long and illustrative history. So these used to be the only three parties around. Now we have a lot more parties in Germany. So we have these three, and in addition we have the Green Party, Die Grünen, which I would characterize as a left-leaning, certainly leaning, but I would say left of center eco-socialist party. I think that's the best way of characterizing these guys. Then left to the Greens, again, we have a party which unimaginatively have called itself the left. So nice. Guess where they are on the political spectrum? There is no proper equivalent here. If you had a party which only had members which were like Jeremy Corbyn, then that might be Die Linke, the left party. So a very hard left, basically.
Right.
In addition, we have one other splinter group, which is also left of center. And then, of course, and we all know this is now coming, this is the far right party, AfD. All eyes on the AfD. And your dog's eyes are clearly also on the AfD because
why does the dog
something to contribute?
What is going on? But I don't know. Again, the edit might cut out this background.
Yes, it might. If not, we just had a dog barking because clearly the AfD does bring out aggressive behavior in people. So AfD stands for Alternative für Deutschland. Alternative for Germany. It is a far-right party, and it is, in my view, a more severely far-right party than any of the other parties which are in the European Union bloc, which is the Reform UK and Le Pen's party. These guys are a little bit more to the right even than they. They are like an ethno-nationalistic far-right party. So that's the spectrum. We have the center right, the center left, and the Lib Dem equivalent, and then we have some parties which are to the left of those, and we have the far right party. Now, obviously, all eyes were on this particular far right party, because even if you didn't follow German politics before, I think now it's pretty clear that we have a party of this nature on the rise in Germany, and because of Germany's specific history with National Socialism, this, even though perhaps in itself that wouldn't be justified, it does focus the mind on the existence of such a party more than perhaps in other countries. Now let's flip back to the actual results. The results were pretty much in line with what the opinion polls had predicted. The opinion polls had been reasonably stable over months, and they predicted the leading parties to be the CDU, which is the center-right party, but the second party would be the AfD, and then we have the rest. And this is exactly what the Germans returned at the ballot box. So the results are as follows. I'll do this from memory. I believe the center-right CDU had 28.5%. The far-right AfD had 20%. That's concerning in itself. The SPD, the old grand dame of European social democratic politics, came out with 16%, which is the worst result in its history. And its history spans near to 200 years. So that really is a devastatingly poor turnout for the SPD, the center-left party. Then we have, excuse me, then we have for the Greens 12%, and Die Linke, the left party, came in with 7%, and the rest of the parties didn't clear the hurdle. In Germany, there is a 5% hurdle. If you fall below this hurdle, you don't have any parliamentary representation. So that's the outcome. So now let's kind of see what that means. As you said, Peter, I mean, a lot of commentators outside of Germany, the English press and the French press and also the American press, they sort of said, well, this is probably going to be a bit better, but perhaps only marginally so. I'm unsure whether I would not be a little bit more positive about the prospect here.
I love the language you used there.
What's that?
You sound so certain about that. But anyway, yeah, carry on.
What do I know? I mean, the thing is this. I mean, I'm going to make no bones about this. Let me speak personally as well. What I think about this. As Ralphie. To me, actually, with my political and philosophical spectrum, and of course others exist and they are valid, but this is me, it's pretty much returned what I was hoping for. So I'm reasonably positive for the future. And the reason that I say this is this. We have to sort of, first of all, take a look at what went before in order to be able to interpret with any sort of sense of confidence what might now happen in future. What went before, I think we all know. What went before was a coalition of three parties. This was the SPD, center-left, the Green Party, an eco-socialist party, and the FDP, the Lib Dem equivalent. And it is a coalition of three parties. This is always inherently unstable, and it is proven to be unstable because Chancellor Scholz from the SPD had to mount the vote of no confidence, which he lost. He wanted to lose that, and he lost it.
Yeah.
But through the government of this coalition known as the Ampel Koalition, the traffic light coalition because of the colors of the parties, the Prime Minister has sort of always been non-committal and indecisive. That certainly is the perception of Germans, but that is also my perception of his political performance, especially when you look at the Ukraine war and the support of weapons to Ukraine. I don't know whether you guys remember there was a problem with the Leopard 2 tanks, which Germany wanted to provide, but then there was wrangling and haggling around this, which lasted for 6 months. And this was in particular because of an indecisive stance on part of the German government led by Scholz. And I do understand where he is. It's difficult for Germany perhaps to lead in these type of negotiations because of Germany's checkered past. Nevertheless, one would have hoped for a more decisive stance. And that is one example, but a similarly indecisive stance was transported into Germany in the domestic politics, in economic politics. The Ampel coalition also had a particularly incompetent minister of not finance, of economics, which was the leader of the Green Party. And this is actually a neutral description, not smearing. He is incompetent. He used to write children's books, and now he was catapulted into leading the economy of Europe's biggest industrialized nation. So
that's a tricky time.
It's a tricky time, exactly.
That's a tricky time. It's not just any old time. It's like a really difficult time.
Indeed. And so the one last comment on this, because we can't talk about this for too long, one last comment on this is this. The Green Party is a socialist ecological party. In my interpretation, the Green Party deliberately exaggerated the necessary targets of the IPCC to move towards a climate neutral outcome. And as a result, they implemented a regulation which didn't allow German industry to breathe. That is the reason why Germany is currently deindustrializing. It is not the only reason, but it is a very important reason. Now, take a look at what we have here. We have the strongest economy in Europe, a modern industrialized nation with the highest, one of the highest energy prices in Europe, which is crippling to an industrialized nation such as Germany. Additionally, hamstrung by the green, in my view, exaggeratedly restrictive regulation, resulting in deindustrialization, which in turn results in less of a economic wealth for families, for normal people, and people get angry, and that plays into the hands of the populists. This is the same in every country. I'm not having a go at the Germans here, but in Germany, the populists are the AfD, and to some extent the failure of the Green Party, and also the failure of the historical Merkel CDU, has, I think, made it has given all this oxygen to the populists in Germany, the AfD. So that is the problem, and clearly that's not a situation which is good for Germany. It's certainly not a situation which is good for the European Union. So here we are now. This is the preamble, basically, and here we are now, and now we have a new government. So this new government, and this is why I think it is going to be probably a better future for Germany now, potentially, than some of the foreign press commentators are pointing out. The new coalition, first of all, is going to be, it hasn't been established yet, but is very likely to be a coalition of two parties only. In order to get 50% majority in parliament, with these results as they are, we do not need three parties. We can make do with two. So that's better in itself because it's easier to find consensus. Second, because of a technicality which I'm not going to comment on now. It is basically possible. Well, let's forget that. It doesn't matter. These two parties are going to be the CDU and the SPD. Importantly, they are not going to include the Green Party in the government coalition. If my analysis, which I have offered, is broadly accurate, then the Green Party is one very important reason why Germany is currently deindustrializing. And if, therefore, this deindustrialization trend will potentially be able to be reverted at all, we have to have a government that excludes the Greens. And we are now going to get this government.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I sort of, it seems to me, I mean, this is probably very simplistic, right? But it seems to me that Gerhard Schroeder is the one who got, or seems to me anyway, to have got closer to Russia in terms of the energy, the energy supply and that kind of thing. Merkel made it even closer, and I feel that it was made closer because of what happened in Fukushima, because that made her change from being very pro-nuclear power to let's not do any nuclear power and go completely towards renewable. And then the reason why she could do that was because she could get the energy coming in to German industry from Russia. And which is why Schroeder was very I think he was still very pro. I mean, although he wasn't chancellor, he was quite angry about the anti-Russian sentiment, and Merkel seemed to be, she wasn't as sort of didn't feel that quite as strongly as he did, but it almost felt that she couldn't say too much because she had also made this kind of, I mean, deal with the devil, if you like, and so, and then you then have Scholz coming along. It took them. I mean, they barely won the election, and I remember wasn't it like 3 months or 6 months before they actually formed a government.
Yes.
It was so difficult to do that. Yes. And then you've got these three parties pulling in different directions, plus a war, to deal with, and just generally, you've got this sort of an inflationary environment, which makes everything difficult as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made for an extremely difficult situation.
Of course, absolutely.
Now, it seems to me now that, like you say, things are potentially simpler because there will only be two parties in the coalition, although their views are quite different. It may well be, yes, there are only two parties, but they are quite far apart in terms of what they think. So there's that. But then maybe the whole Russia-Trump thing may actually help the whole situation, because if Russia, do you think in terms? Well, I'm just saying that Russia, if there's an agreement to be had,
I understand.
Russia can then sort of turn on the taps again, and then Germany will maybe say, okay, well, we'll take the power, we'll take your energy, just because we're at peace, we're not at war anymore, and then so then costs will come down. That will be easy, make things easier for industry, and then you've then got. Yeah, but I don't know about the Trump thing. But anyway,
look,
so what do you think?
I'm with you on that. I don't think this analysis is simplistic at all. I think it's actually very, very, very pertinent analysis. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, basically, there was rapprochement towards the Russians in terms of energy. There was an overly focus and dependency on Russian gas, which was amplified and made worse by the totally awful decision by Merkel to exit nuclear power. Let us not forget that
Although
nuclear
it won the
power
election, though, in the end.
let us not forget that nuclear power at the time was a world-leading technology. World leading, and Merkel gave that up. That was Germany's Brexit moment. There was no reason to do this, and they just did it. And the consequence was very high energy prices, which, as I said, is poison to the German economy, probably even more so than to any other economy in Europe, because Germany's economy is the most highly industrialized economy. So with all of this baggage, you move into the Ampel coalition, the traffic light coalition, and in addition now you get the Greens in government, which are putting even more constraints on industry because of their exaggerated interpretation of the IPCC climate targets. So this is basically the history. And you are correct in saying that this is not going to be a walk in the park. Of course it isn't. But when I hear foreign commentators talk about this, I'm wondering whether they are not amplifying the differences too much between the parties, because we also must not forget that in the SPD, this is the center-left party, in the center-left party SPD, there are some politicians who are actually quite close to the center, who have very reasonable and conservative opinions in themselves. And one politician who I'm thinking about here has a very cool name. His name is Pistorius. He used to be defense minister, and he is an excellent guy. I mean, an excellent man. It's a bit like saying that Tony Blair was Labour, yes, but he was very close to the centre. He could have been in a more lenient conservative party. He probably would have been at home there too. And so it will depend on whether Merz, who is going to be the next chancellor, is going to be able to find people in the SPD who are going to be close to his view. Now, what does that mean in terms of the European Union? This is what you were asking. And what does that mean in the context of the New World Order, which Trump has basically announced recently? Now, the situation here is multifaceted again and a bit complicated, but I think that first of all, it is going to be, and I'm papering over all the complications now and all the differences and all the issues. It is going to be net positive for Europe if Germany's economy is going to strengthen. There was no reason to expect such a strengthening under the Ampel coalition. And let us also not forget that the indecisiveness of the SPD, Scholz was the architect of this indecisiveness. Scholz is gone. And so I'm sort of expecting the CDU-SPD to be able to come together and form a government which is decisive and will be able to implement some decisions that we now need. However, there is one thing which we haven't discussed yet, and it is a technicality. The technicality is this. The German economy has, every economy needs to watch the level of debt which it has. Because once the debt servicing reaches large percentages of GDP, then obviously you will have an issue. Now, the Germans don't do anything by half, ever. So you might have thought that the outgoing government, was able to say, well, let's do a law. Let's do a law that's a certain metric, maybe the debt divided by GDP cannot exceed a certain level. But they didn't do that. No, they actually went forward and changed the constitution. So it is now embedded and enshrined in the German constitution that you can. This is basically like the Second Amendment in the US. I mean, if you go against the Second Amendment, you get killed in the US. And so basically, this is very much clearly now in the DNA of the German of German law-based and rule-based society, that you cannot increase indebtedness over a certain level. Now, the reason why this is important is this. We have to. Every society in Germany, this is how it links up with the New World Order, has to increase their spending on defense. There is no alternative, and we discussed it in the last podcast. The New World is a world of societies which are pre-war societies. We do not have the luxury anymore to invest a lot more in sectors which are not defense. That luxury is gone. Trump has all but ripped up NATO, and we have to fend for ourselves here. That in itself is not necessarily an issue if we can direct a meaningful amount of funds into defense, fine, but we have to find the money somewhere. This is not going to happen without increasing the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling cannot be increased in Germany because it is enshrined in the constitution that you can't. You can change the constitution, but you need a 2/3 majority to do so, and that the results did not deliver. The CDU-SPD coalition, if it comes together, will not have a 2/3 majority, not even if the Greens vote with it. In fact, what you do have is a blocking minority of the left and the AfD, which, although you might think they're on opposite parts of the political spectrum, will vote together against war spending, what they call war spending. And so there is an issue there, and we need to see some wrangling and some maneuvering and finessing in order to get around this. So I'm not saying that the path is clear. There are these issues, but I think net, it is a better situation now than we used to have. At least there is now the potential for Germany to revert some of the deindustrialization trend which we have seen in the last several years, and there is now at least hope that this might happen. If this happens, it is good for the European Union, it is good for the defense capacity of the European Union at the time that Trump has basically ripped up the old security architecture contract which has preserved the peace for the last 70 years.
Yeah, no, interesting. So yeah. So anyway, we obviously it's only just happened, so we'll just have to see how it pans out. But yeah, okay, right. So let's move on to the next one. And I just thought this was interesting to say. Why is Trump being so nice to Starmer when he's basically been slagging him off since he won? Before he won, since he won, he's been slagging off his Starmer's cabinet, individuals in the cabinet. He has also been very rude about most European politicians as well. And so suddenly, when we see in the newspapers today about how complimentary he's been about Keir Starmer, praising his accent, the beauty of his wife, the I don't know what she looks like, by the way, so I can't give a second opinion. And he has said what a special relationship this is, and I mean, this, given what he's saying pretty much until now, this is quite surprising.
Yes.
And, you do think, well, initially you think, well, why is that? And I cynically wonder whether the idea here is that, I think, one of the things is, Trump's end game, or one of his end games, is to split up the EU. And I think by being nice to the UK, he will be able to split the EU. He will be able to weaken the resolve of the EU, because the UK is obviously, out of the EU now. And putting it bluntly, being nice to the UK implies that actually leaving the EU is a good thing, because it will mean that the US will be nice to you. And there are a number of countries who are not fanatically supportive of the EU, and therefore could potentially be tempted by something.
Yes.
And and so that's what it seems like to me. Like he's being nice to the UK purely to drive, to put the pressure on countries to leave the EU.
Yeah.
So that's my own kind of theory on it. But yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm convinced there is an element of that. I mean, with Trump, it's always difficult to know why he does anything, isn't it? Sometimes I wonder whether he himself knows why he's doing certain things. There's a personal issue, the personality issue as well, I think. If you're nice to Trump, then he probably likes you. If you are antagonistic to Trump, or you are acting in a way that he might interpret as being just up to his own, as an equal to him, I don't think that's necessarily very good. Trump likes sycophants, and he likes people who flatter him. Now, I'm not saying Starmer wasn't a sycophant, not even close. I actually thought Starmer's performance was pretty good, but he did manage to be complimentary to him, flatter him a bit, and that is already positive with Trump. The second one is, I do think there is this kind of special relationship with Trump. In a very sort of, it was much better when we had a queen, because he admired her. It's a little bit less interesting for him to have a king, but it's still this sort of American fascination with European pomp and 5,000 years of history, this sort of thing which they don't have in America. So these are the subtle things, and it was almost, wasn't it weird? I mean, watching it, I expected a car crash. And what I saw was a bit of a...
I think everyone was expecting that, wasn't it? I think all the press it was almost like, sitting behind the sofa with you watching the TV through your fingers, thinking, what is going to happen?
And what I got was like a bro fest going on a little bit. And if you contrast that with the meeting with Macron, I mean, he doesn't like Macron very much.
No.
There's an antipathy going on between the two, but then clearly Macron reaches over while Trump is in mid-flow, touches him on the arm and says, no, mate, that's not actually accurate what you're saying. What is actually happening is this. Well, this is like a disaster. This is not exactly the recipe. The idea is to flatter the man, Emmanuel, not antagonize him. So, I stop with that. I mean, there is an element of that, I'm sure of it, but it is not the driving element. And I think your point is potentially insightful, and it is the driving element here. Let's stand back for just 1 second and remember what he's doing economically. And here we are talking about tariffs. We did threaten coming back. It's coming back to tariffs.
It's but like only, the cockroach of yes.
But only briefly. Yeah. So what I just wanted to mention that he is weaponizing tariff policy, and he is basically saying, look, if you're not nice to America, then we slap tariffs on you, and then you can kiss your GDP growth goodbye. That's sort of how he's acting.
That's so perfectly put. Yeah.
Now, here's a subtlety. He, for reasons which I can't intellectually replicate, but he seems to believe that countries which have a balance of trade surplus with the US are somehow hostile to the US, are somehow treating America poorly. And these countries therefore have to be penalized by tariffs, which he also thinks is cash which is coming in the door from those countries, which we have talked about in the past, which is a weird belief. I don't know why he doesn't grasp that this is not the case, but that is his idea. And so therefore, Germany, going back to Germany now, is in a pretty much of a tight spot, because Germany are the masters of the universe in exporting stuff to other countries. So I'm not sure there's a country in the world with which Germany doesn't have a balance of trade surplus. Certainly it has one with the US. So just to counterpoint this for a moment and come back to the UK. If you are a country like Germany, you're probably in trouble, because Germany doesn't have a special relationship with the US. Germans barely speak English. I mean, certainly speak English with a very strange accent, as I have been demonstrating for the last 5 hours. and
I think it's an endearing accent. It's an endearing and confidence, not confidence boosting. It generates confidence.
Not
right?
even you are able to find the right words here in the flattery. And I've known you for 30 years, and we're mates, and you're supposed to be my friend. Yeah, I'm miffed now. Anyway, cool. Moving on with this. Sorry, I'm laughing now. I forgot what I was going to say. So Germany is bad because Germany has a balance of trade surplus with the US, and also there's no special relationship, and also it is still the heart of the EU. And your point, I think, is valid, very valid indeed. If you now look at the UK, it's sort of from that point of view, in Trump land, it's the anti-Germany. It has already left the EU.
Yeah.
And it has a special relationship, and the accent is nice.
And beautiful, I believe, is the word that he
absolutely.
used.
And this is an important third point, the UK is a net importing economy. It has a balance of trade deficit with the US. And therefore, if Trump wanted to use sort of country relationships as a wedge to drive into Europe, it would be exactly the UK to pick, because he can afford not to penalize the UK with tariffs, because they have a balance of trade deficit with the US in the first place. And therefore he could be, maybe he's construing a little bit of an idea here, saying that, guys, you may be in the EU and I'm going to slap tariffs on you, but if you're not in the EU, then you might actually escape the tariff bludgeon. So it's never clear. I don't think Trump is a strategic thinking man. Professor Michael Clark, who I think everybody knows as an excellent analyst of military and geopolitical scenarios, has said in the recent interview something which snapped into focus for me what Trump wants. Professor Michael Clark said, Trump wants his face on Mount Rushmore and a Nobel Peace Prize, and if he gets that, then he's going to leave office at the end of this term and is going to be a very happy man. And I think that's probably true. Trump needs adulation, he needs praise, he needs support of his person. If he gets his face on Mount Rushmore and leaves office with the accolade of being the greatest president who has ever taken office in America, that's what he wants. And when people say he's the master of the deal, all he wants to do is deals, I think that's not wrong, but it misses the point a little bit. He doesn't really want to make deals. He just wants to be seen to solve some problems which other people haven't been able to solve, in order to get that accolade and his face on Mount Rushmore. Because if you think, if you see the pace at which he's going here,
isn't it Mount Rushmore?
Yes, Mount. What do I keep
Mount
saying?
Rushmore. I thought
that doesn't exist. Yeah, Mount Rushmore, unless he renames it, of course. Which is
Mount Trumpmore. Although actually,
beautiful. I would not put it past him, because we've all seen the video of Gaza, what he wants to do there.
Oh God!
And so anyway, but the pace at which he's moving here. Solve Gaza with doing this deal. Solve Ukraine doing this deal. I mean, he's not really interested in lasting geopolitical solutions. He is interested in, sort of successes which he can notch up and put under his belt. So pulling it back to the UK, therefore, I think that's possibly the context. That's why he was sweet. But with Trump also, he's an odd fish. I mean, you cannot really trust anything he does. I mean, he may like you until he doesn't, and then we'll have to see.
Don't you think he sounds like one of these nightmare bosses, that we've had in the past, or not necessarily me or you, not necessarily, but there are, that whole thing about being unpredictable, not knowing, what you're going to get, keeps everyone on their toes, and it's just, this is what he's doing, isn't it? Really, but then for all the bizarre things he comes out with, if you just looked at it, he has got all these conversations going properly in a very short space of time. I mean,
that's what I meant.
Whereas normally, the whole, the Gaza, the talks and stuff, there's lots of toing and froing, and there's different levels of talks going on, and yet he just blusters in and says, right, we're going to do this, and then it kind of people, because he's so unpredictable, and because he's basically filled all his cabinet posts and his legislature and stuff with yes men. He's got the power, he's got the momentum, and everyone knows that. They kind of, and everyone else is in a weak spot as well. So that makes it worse. So he's getting strong and getting stronger, and everyone else is weak, or at a very weak point in their, having been, with the war, but also a pandemic left, the leftovers from the pandemic. He's in a very strong position, and
well, yes,
everyone knows it.
This is an interesting point. I have to, it's people have said frequently that he is unpredictable, and that is basically a good thing, and it may well be. The only thing I would say is I don't think he is deliberately unpredictable. I don't think he chooses unpredictability as a strategic or tactical property. I think he really is unpredictable. Even he doesn't necessarily know what he's going to do next. However, what, of course, the unique property of Trump is this, I think. He presides over still the most important economy in the world and the most capable global military in the world. That gives him a huge amount of leverage, which other countries just don't have. And the property.
The other thing as
hang
well,
on a second. And the property.
I've got to also say the tech. I think that the army is yes, but I actually think the cherry on the top, which actually that does it down, is it's the position that America holds with tech. That's what cements the whole thing together. I think
it may, but what I just you are right, but the tech thing is weird, isn't it? Because it's still in its formative stage. There's China as well. The US is ahead of China in some respects. China is ahead of the US in other respects. But you are not incorrect. I mean, this is another very important point. My point was more basically going to be that the economic and military leverage is there. He has got it, and he is not afraid to use it. Whereas other presidents, Biden, I mean anybody, Clinton, name anybody, even Reagan, would have been more guarded, would have brought it to bear in a more rules-based way. Whereas he basically just said, is what you said. I mean, just look at the negotiations, in inverted commas, in Ukraine. this odd deal with the minerals, which is now appearing. I mean, originally he was saying, well, you need to pay us 500 billion, and this is absolutely the case. And if you don't, then we are going to not give you any weapons anymore. And then Zelenskyy said, yeah, well, this is not really acceptable. So no, we're not going to sign it. And interestingly, Trump is not. Okay.
The dog just came in and knocked something over.
The dog has destroyed NATO.
You know, she does this at very pertinent points.
It does. I mean, I'm amazed. I mean, it just accentuates whatever I say.
Yeah.
So he did actually. Now I forgot what I was gonna say. Absolutely brilliant. What was I gonna say? I completely lost my train of thought now. Right. So Zelenskyy was saying, this is not really acceptable to us, mate. So we're not going to design this at all. And interestingly, Trump is then not a person who is like you're acting like a sociopath or whatever. He's not saying, he's not jumping up and down and screaming with frothing from the mouth. What he's doing is he's going like, oh, all right, we do another plan then. Then don't pay us 500 billion, pay us this and put something in the pool. So to some extent, although I keep criticizing the man as not being the deal maker that he himself makes himself out to be, to some extent he is a deal maker. And he's not a pushover by no means of the expense. But sometimes I think what he does first is he just basically makes a 100% claim, which is completely ridiculous. And if the other party says yes to it because of the leverage the US has, then he's like, oh, well, good then, excellent. But if the other party is a proper negotiator and they say, well, we can't actually accede to that, that's not possible, then he doesn't go away miffed, or disappears, but he goes away for like 1-2 days and his admin team pull together a different deal. And sometimes something positive comes out of it. Like if you think Trump 01, his first administration, we get the Abrams Accords. And sometimes something disastrous comes out of it. So this is the situation. I don't know whether you guys know Isaac Asimov's famous novel, the Foundation novel. There a mutant came in, and the mutant basically scuppered up the geopolitical predictions of the teams of historians in that story. And I always think Trump is that mutant. He comes in and he completely tears up the playbook, and sometimes something positive comes out of it. Often it doesn't. So back to your original question, yes, I believe it is true. He weaponizes tariffs, and what he is sort of trying to do is drive a wedge in between the EU. And he might well say subliminally to people, look, if you leave the EU, then I'm going to be nice to you. The UK has already done it, but one needs to be careful here. There is an element that if you do have a balance of trade surplus with the US, then he's not going to be your friend whether you're inside the EU or not. Anyway, that's where we are.
But there we go. They're very good. I mean, never a dull moment when Trump is around. That's for sure.
No, or your dog, actually.
No. I mean, even the dog's getting involved. Yeah,
fantastic.
So, brilliant. Anyway, well, look. I mean, I think that's a good point at which to end. And thank you very much. I mean, I really appreciate that. And I think that I definitely. I mean, the German, political situation. I mean, that's really, very interesting. So, anyway, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, everyone, for watching or listening, however you consume this. And we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll be back again very soon.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.